Number 10. Mount Pony. In 1969, the Federal Reserve built a 400-foot-long bunker in Virginia with steel reinforced concrete over a foot thick. It is also covered by multiple feet of dirt and surrounded by fences and guard posts. The computers within the facility are the central node for all American electric money transfers. Until the 1990s, it also served as an extra government facility. For many years after its creation, it stored around $1 billion to rebuild the American economy if it ever fell to a nuclear attack. Currently, it stores the archive of movies from the Library of Congress, but because of it being hardened against nuclear attack, many people believe that the facility is sitting ready to be used in a time of need. The government tries to prevent any photos of the facility being placed online, as having the layout of the facility become public knowledge would remove any secrecy and advantage in the future. Only a few photos of it can be found online, and they honestly look straight out of the back rooms. Number 9. Maid of Harlech. While secret government facilities are one thing, it can be hard to believe that it's illegal to photograph something that you might just stumble upon on an afternoon walk. A plane that was nicknamed the Maid of Harlech crashed off the coast of Wales back in September of 1942. The pilot lost control during a training exercise and the plane crashed, though the pilot did walk away in pretty good shape. The plane is under around 2 meters of water and only becomes visible when the tide conditions are just right. The wreckage has never moved in all this time, and while its actual location is kept under wraps, it is in a public area that we assume anybody can access. However, you may find yourself in some legal trouble if you saw it and try to take a photo of it. The Protection of Military Remains Act prevents the location of any military remains being publicly shared, so any photos of the plane that give away its location are quickly removed from the internet and are not allowed to be seen. Number 8. Tiananmen Square. While this image is not forbidden for the majority of us to look at, it is forbidden for around 1.5 billion people. In 1989, student-led demonstrations in support of democracy took place in Tiananmen Square in China, the protesters attempting to stop military movement on the location. The government of China then declared martial law, and they used their military alongside massive tanks to run down any protesters that tried to remain in the square. Because of the horrific nature of the event, the Chinese government has attempted to cover up the fact that the event in 1989 ever happened. Every year on the anniversary, they undertake a massive censorship campaign to ensure that nobody is talking about the event. Many people in the country have no idea that it ever even happened, but we have access to one of the most infamous images from the event, a protester standing in front of an advancing tank. While we can view it whenever we like, people in China are strictly punished if they ever even speak of what happened. Number 7. North Korea. Similarly to the censorship that takes place in China, North Korea often covers up the reality of what goes on in their country. But while they do hide it from their own citizens, they also hide it from any outsiders who may try to get a peek at how the country operates. Information going in and out of the country is strictly controlled to maintain their image, so if you ever want to visit, you'll probably have a pretty difficult time. Anyone who wants to enter the country must be accompanied by an escort, and you are only allowed to see pre-approved parts of the country, which are typically staged in order to look much better than the reality. While you may be allowed to photograph these areas, photographs of anything else will be destroyed and could land you in pretty serious trouble. The main thing they want to avoid anyone seeing is the major poverty in the country, with most families actually undertaking very hard labor jobs. There are also other rules, like how you are not allowed to photograph a statue from behind, so if you do manage to get one of these pictures, you're very lucky and very brave. Number 6. Iranian missile launch. One of the main things that governments all across the world like to cover up is their military power. They don't want you to know just how much power they're packing until it's already too late. In 2019, the Iranian government was conducting a missile test launch that went terribly wrong. It resulted in a large explosion that destroyed the whole facility they were operating out of. This occurred when tensions between Iran and the rest of the world were at an all-time high. So Donald Trump, of course, tweeted out a satellite image of the testing site. While it may seem like a normal picture, the United States military became furious and wished that the photo had never been released. This is because of just how clear it is. They didn't want people knowing the extent of just how powerful their satellite cameras are. From the image alone, people were able to find out the location and name of the satellite that took the photo. The government attempted to redact the image and prevent any more people from seeing it, but it was on Twitter and it was already too late. Number 5. Area 51. Area 51, the infamous government base in Nevada, was not even publicly confirmed by the government to exist until 2013. Honestly, way more recently than I thought it was. They stated that it was a military testing site, but a majority of the public believe that it's home to aliens and all evidence thereof. Because of the maintained secrecy surrounding the base, you are not allowed to fly in their airspace, and any pictures of the facility are pretty strictly prohibited. However, in 2020, one pilot managed to lie their way into getting the most up-close and clear footage of the facility like ever. In 2020, the private pilot named Gabriel managed to gain access to restricted airspace by telling them he just wanted to continue his quick route to the airport, them not knowing he was equipped with his GoPro to capture footage of the secret facility. He states how he didn't see any activity around the base, but we are fortunate enough to have the images that show even more of the base's layout, while the government is probably not too happy about the fact that this footage even exists. Number 4. Ayi Arnagari. It is a military base in Greece that they seem fully determined to cover up and prevent anyone from knowing anything about it. While you can use Google Earth to see an aerial image of just about anywhere on the planet, there are a few areas that are blurred from your view, and this military base is one of them. It's located in central Athens, and while you can see the building that surrounds it, the full complex is completely pixelated and blurred out. Basically, all images and information about the facility is kept under wraps by the government. Some people believe that it's a military training facility for new recruits, but could also be their military command headquarters. Photos from ground level or of anyone entering or exiting the facility are strictly prohibited. Number 3. Pine Gap. The United States government has multiple facilities that are used for collecting and storing secret intelligence. The Pentagon is probably the most well-known one. However, how publicly known the Pentagon is could be on purpose to distract from the other intelligence facilities that they're trying to hide from the public. One lesser-known one is the Pine Gap surveillance facility that is located in Australia, a crucial base for the United States surveillance of Asia. Because of its importance, they do everything they can to prevent any images of the base making it into public hands. This is because they don't want any information of its layout, operations, or abilities to be known by enemy states and the people that they are collecting information on. Unfortunately for them, it is still possible for the public to actually get pretty close to it, so there are a few images that can be found of the outside. Number 2. X-37 space plane. The United States military is constantly testing and experimenting with new things, and one of the main things that they have tried to improve in the past is military air travel. Obviously, they wouldn't want any information about these new things to get leaked, with the fear it may end up in enemy hands. One of their most secretive designs ever was the X-37 space plane, and it landed at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the government attempting to prevent any images of this event being leaked. It's an autonomously piloted space plane and was landing there after completing a 2-year mission in orbit, 2 of them apparently being in service. While we do have pictures of what it looks like, its purpose and what technology and capabilities it has remains under wraps. Because of how secretive the government has been with this potential new spy plane, the images that we do have of it are pretty rare, and they're not too happy about the fact that we have them. Number 1. Leaked military hardware. The United States government aren't the only ones who have had leaks of experimental military equipment. The Chinese military also had a similar situation occur, except they accidentally leaked it all on their own. In their magazine titled Modern Ships, they included an image of the new H-6N bomber. While it was purposeful to show off the ship, they didn't intend to show off the new design of the large projectile attached to the bottom of it, experts believing it was built to help with China's territory disputes. As soon as they realized what they'd done, the publishers retracted the image, but it was too late and it was already out there. So they tried to claim it was a computer-generated error, but more pictures leaked online of the actual jet in operation, matching the image in the magazine. The images hit the internet and they lost all hopes of trying to cover it up.
Now, coming in at number 10, UFOs. Do you guys remember in April of 2020 when the Pentagon released UFO videos? The videos, captured by naval aviators, show objects flying through the sky, one rotating against the wind, and the pilots can be heard just being completely flabbergasted. When they first appeared online, they breathed new life into the decades-long conversation about whether interstellar visitors had ever come to Earth, and extraterrestrial enthusiasts were more than a little excited about the whole thing. While the Pentagon has said that there are usually some more closer to home explanations for most occurrences like these, the Pentagon has never made any assertion about what exactly is going on in the videos. Recorded in 2004 and early 2015 over the Pacific and off the East Coast, they simply say that the phenomenon is unexplainable. I'm gonna go ahead and say that there's nothing that proves these are aliens, and that's why these particular videos were released in the first place. I'm sure they've got more substantial evidence of aliens hiding somewhere. Number 9. Tank Man. The Tiananmen Square protests were student-led demonstrations in 1989 calling for democracy, free speech, and a free press in China. The amount of protesters began reaching into the millions, and when martial law had not deterred them, the government became much more hostile. On June 4th, military personnel and police began to storm the square using live rounds, with hundreds of thousands of casualties and 10,000 arrests. A man on June 5th, though, was photographed standing alone against and on top of a massive tank in the infamous square, and that image has circulated around the world. But it's likely that many people in China itself haven't seen much of it. That's because every year on the anniversary of the massacre, the Chinese government puts a massive amount of effort into making sure that there is not even a mention of it in the media or on the internet, as if the government would prefer to just erase it from history altogether. Number 8. X-37 spaceplane. Once upon a time, one of the most secretive advanced US experimental aircraft, the X-37B spaceplane, landed at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and the government did not want many pictures taken. The funny thing is that there are actually a lot of pictures of this event and of the craft itself, but what it's being used for or what its missions have been is the part that no one really knows. The autonomously piloted aircraft had just spent 2 years in our Earth's orbit on a highly classified mission. The craft looks like a miniature space shuttle, and it is launched into orbit using a secondary vehicle. It has had a few missions that prove that it is useful as a reusable space vehicle, which is the whole thing, but we don't know exactly what its purpose is or what technology it contains. Okay, number 7. Pine Gap. A video like this would not be a video like this if it didn't include a secret intelligence facility. Places like Joint Defense Facility Pine Gap as an example. A US and Australian satellite surveillance base 18 kilometers southwest of the town of Alice Springs, Northern Territory, Australia. This base is a crucial facility for the United States monitoring of Asia, and they make very sure that basically no images of the site get out there. Obviously there are images, and there's also a TV show that is set in the facility, but obviously the show speculates about the actual goings on because there are no photos that make it out of the facility for fear of having the technological capabilities of the surveillance base leaked to enemy powers. Even its location in the smack dab middle of Australia makes it too remote for spy ships passing in international waters to intercept the signals. While you can know what it looks like, people like you and me are very unlikely to ever know what it looks like on the inside. Number 6. Aoi Anagrio Base. I have got another military base for you here. Google Earth is a wondrous thing. You can find just the silliest stuff on there, you can check out your childhood home, and you can see landmarks from across the globe from the safety and comfort of your home. But one thing you can't do is take a look at the Greek Aoi Anagroi military base in central Athens. While other military bases are actually visible on Google Earth, the Greek government went an extra length by having any Google Earth images of this base blurred out. It's kind of strange to me because if you look at the images of the base, almost every single building building is still visible, but obviously you can't see exactly what those buildings are used for, and maybe that's the point, because the base's operational capacity is also a tightly guarded secret. It's apparently supposed to be a training facility, but others have speculated that it's where Greek military command is situated. Number 5. Iranian missile failure. Back in 2019, an Iranian missile test launch went incredibly wrong, destroying the facility where the launch took place. Enjoying the failure a bit more than you might suspect, President Trump shared a satellite surveillance image of the site on Twitter. An incredibly sharp satellite image, and that was the problem. Satellites are the best way to spy on other countries, and so the capabilities of those satellites are kept incredibly secret to avoid other countries developing countermeasures for this form of espionage. For example, using the photo shared by Trump, an astronomer was able to locate exactly which satellite was watching Iran when the test launch went downhill. USA 224, an optical reconnaissance satellite, had the capability to take a clear enough photo to determine things that are 10 centimeters wide, meaning the photo itself showed that the satellite was one of the most powerful known surveillance systems ever made. Number 4. Nuclear power plants. Back in 2016, pictures taken inside some of the USA's nuclear power plants were more than a little unsettling. As most of us know, nuclear power, while relatively clean and efficient, has the potential to be a huge problem when not handled correctly. Like, huge as in planet size. The incident at the Chernobyl power plant, for example, eventually spread radiation over the entire globe thanks to the way that air works. So, when the 2016 pictures were released and showed some American power plants in completely awful states of disrepair, it was more than a little worrying. The pictures were shared in an effort by workers to try and get the facilities brought back up to code. But the worst part about this is that the pictures taken at a later date show some of the plants in the exact same state they were in 2016. Unfortunately, more photos are very unlikely to be seen, as the government has made a point of being more thorough in choosing who and who can't get in. Number 3. North Korea. I could probably fill this whole list with pictures from North Korea. Most people are aware of the fact that North Korea is under one of the strictest regimes in the world. Visitors to the country are escorted everywhere they go, and that's usually only to pre-vetted locations. Most trips try their best to avoid any areas of poverty, and there are some really weird rules about pictures. Like, for example, it's okay to take pictures of statues of Kim, but not okay to take pictures of the statues from the rear. It's odd, but despite the regime's best efforts to limit documentation and pictures being leaked, a few have made it out thanks to crafty photographers. Looking through an album posted online, there are pictures of crowds of soldiers, pictures of kids on computers but with no electricity, soldiers helping on farms, people collecting grass for food, kids playing on almost empty streets, a subway tunnel, and an unfinished painting, and every single one of those photos are illegal. And they aren't the worst of the bunch by any stretch of the imagination. Unfortunately, the photographer who took them has been banned from returning to North Korea once they realized that these pictures had made it onto the internet. Number 2. Mexican asylum plan. During a press conference in June of 2019, Trump was speaking about a deal struck with the Mexican government that would avoid extra tariffs in order to make managing immigrants easier. It's by no means the biggest of security fumbles, but during the conference, Trump was waving around the folded and signed agreement just to show that it was indeed in the works. And the problem came thanks to the sun. You see, it was a real sunny day in June 2019 when this conference was held, and so it illuminated through the paper, and all the words of the confidential in the works agreement were visible for all to see, especially a photographer with a particularly high resolution camera. With the photo he captured, every single word in the document was visible and readable. It's not like this document would affect many people or anything. I guess the unsettling part is more the fact that this even happened in the first place. Number 1. The Xinjiang internment camps. Heading back to both China and Google Maps for our number 1 spot is the Xinjiang internment camps. Operated by the government and the Chinese Communist Party Provincial Standing Committee, Human Rights Watch say that these camps are and have been used to indoctrinate and other Muslims since 2017, and the camps have been criticized by the governments of many countries and human rights organizations for alleged human rights violations. The camps are reportedly operated outside the Chinese legal system, with many people being interred without a trial and with no actual charges. Local authorities are reportedly holding hundreds of thousands of in these camps as well as members of other ethnic minority groups in China, in order to apparently counter extremism and to, quote, promote social integration. With all that, it's not really surprising that the area of the internment camps has been partly replaced with plain light gray tiles on Baidu maps and completely blurred in Google Maps, and many countries have stood in opposition to the rounding up of at these camps.
Number 10. Sea creature. Hook Island is off the coast of Queensland, Australia, and Robert Le Serac, his family, and a friend, Hank de Jong, stayed there for 3 months in late 1964. On December 12, 1964, the Le Seracs and Hank were crossing Stowhaven Bay on an island when Robert's wife noticed something odd in the water. It was a long, tadpole-like creature. It was black, and it was believed that it was at least 30 feet long. Robert and Hank decided to venture into the water and record it on film. When they entered the water, the monster was even bigger than they thought. But as they started recording, the creature opened its mouth and swam away. When they checked the film, they had no footage of the creature, but the pictures clearly showed it. The pictures were published in a magazine and eventually spread across the world, making it one of the most famous and unexplained pictures of a cryptid. Number 9. A spaceman? This is one of the world's most famous mysterious photos. The image was taken by Jim Templin near Solway Firth in Coombe, England in 1964. It is a simple photo of his daughter, but behind Jim's daughter, who was supposed to be the only figure in the picture, there is another entity resembling a spaceman. Jim insists he did not see anyone else present when the photograph was taken, so what's behind her? The image was reproduced widely in contemporary newspapers and gained the interest of UFOologists. Jim took the picture to the police in Carlisle, who, after many doubts, examined it and stated there was nothing suspicious about it. The local newspaper, the Cumberland News, picked up the story, and within hours it was all over the world. Regarding the photo, Jim said, "The picture is certainly not fake, and I am bemused as anyone else as to how this figure appeared in the background. Over the 4 decades the photo has been in the public domain, I have had many thousands of letters from all around the world with various ideas or possibilities, which most make little sense to me. Modern analysis suggests that the figure might have been the photographer's wife standing with her back towards the cameras, but not even this explanation is convincing enough." Number 8. Strange lights. Since the 1940s, and possibly even earlier, there has been a strange light phenomenon observed in Hessdalen Valley, Norway. The spectacle has a form of white or yellow light of unknown origin standing or floating above ground level. Between 1981 and 1984, the lights were observed up to 20 times per week, but have drastically reduced in frequency since then, about 10 to 20 times per year. Why the decrease all of a sudden? No one knows. No one knows where the lights come from, but UFO enthusiasts took this as a sign that the valley was a portal to other worlds. It wasn't just conspiracy theorists that were interested in this, as the strange bursts of light in the 1980s attracted physicists too. Interest piqued by the idea of some sort of explained natural phenomenon. In the decades since, scientists have determined the glow likely comes from air turned into plasma. Despite ongoing research and numerous working hypotheses, there is no convincing explanation for the origin of these lights, and seems like it will always be a mystery. Number 7. Fairy circles. For those of you with trypophobia, look away. Found in the arid grasslands of the western part of South Africa, the fairy circles are circular patches of barren land. They typically occur in monospecific grassy vegetation, and the circles vary between 7 and 49 feet in diameter. Until 2014, the phenomenon was only known to occur in the western parts of southern Africa, but that year ecologists were alerted to similar rings of vegetation outside of Africa and a part of Pilbara in western Australia. There are various myths about these fairy circles. One from Himba people say that these barren patches are said to have been caused by the gods, spirits, and natural divinities. Of specific beliefs, the Himba people note that their original ancestor, Merkuru, was responsible for the creation of the fairy circles, or that they were the footprints of gods. Another myth, promoted by some tour guides, is that the circles are formed by a dragon in the earth and that its poisonous breath kills the vegetation. The origin and history of fairy circles have long been a puzzle, and even now, scientists are not sure who or what created them. One favorite assumption is that a sand termite is responsible for the circles, but the range of the phenomenon is much wider than that of termite species, so it's unknown. Number 6. Ghostly waters. In December 1924, James Courtney and Michael Meehan were crew members of the SS Watertown. While on the ship, they were cleaning a cargo tank of the oil tanker, and they were overcome by gas fumes, which resulted in both of their deaths. Due to this, the crew buried them in the sea, but to their astonishment, the ghostly faces of the soldiers appeared in the water the next day. Yeah, like in the waves. Later on, many crew members reported to see the faces as well. The faces were so visible that the captain of the ship ordered them to take a picture of them to have proof. You know, so people didn't think that they were all crazy. In the picture, you can clearly see two faces, and it's just plain creepy. When they returned to the land, the negative was even checked for fakery and proclaimed genuine. Number 5. Pyramid on the Moon. This is for all the people who believe that the moon is real. In December 1972, this image was taken by Apollo 17 in the area known as Geophone Rock. NASA listed the image as blank, but after retouching the photo, you can see that it's not completely blank. Turning up the contrast, a pyramidal structure can be seen. So what was it? Was it some malfunction of the camera, or is there actually a pyramid on the moon? NASA has never given a credible version of the issue, which has led some speculations about what else can actually be on the moon, hidden to public awareness. And listen, not to be a crazy conspiracy theorist, but maybe it's true that aliens built the pyramids on Earth, as it looks like they did on the moon too. NASA, please tell us the truth. Number 4. Figure climbing the stairs. Reverend Ralph Hardy, a retired clergyman from White Rock, British Columbia, took this famous photograph in 1966. Originally, he only wanted to take a picture of the elegant tulip staircase in the Queen's House section of the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, England. And I mean, I don't blame him, they're pretty. But upon development, the photo revealed a shrouded figure climbing the stairs. It's strange and unsettling, and Ralph says there was no one else in the frame when he took it. So, is it a ghost? That seems like the most reasonable explanation at this point. Experts who examined the original negative concluded that it had not been tampered with. The vicinity of the staircase is rumored to be haunted, and unexplained footsteps had often been heard there, so it could definitely be a ghost, but it's still very strange. Number 3. The Young Boy. One of the most famous haunted houses in the United States is the Dutch Colonial House at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. The haunting stems from the night of November 13, 1974, when 23-year-old Ronald Defoe killed all 6 members of his family. He was then arrested, convicted, and given 6 concurrent life sentences. In December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, moved into the house and claimed that spooky things were happening. For example, George would wake up at 3:15 every morning, which was the approximate time that Ronald killed his family. Kathleen said she could feel a ghostly presence and be embraced by it. All of this and more caused the family to flee in fear after only staying in the house for 28 days. Due to this, demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the house and set up time-lapse infrared cameras and caught this photo. This picture wasn't made public until 3 years later when George Lutz appeared on the Merv Griffith Show in 1979. Believers of the haunting think that the photo is a ghost of the youngest Defoe son, John Matthew, who was 9 at the time of the murders. Others believe it's a staged photo, but despite the controversy, this picture is one of the most frightening images from the Amityville horror. Number 2. Man falling from the ceiling. Back in the 1950s, the Cooper family from Texas moved into their new house. Once there, they took a family photo. Normal, right? But when the picture was developed, the image of a body falling from the ceiling was clearly visible. To be clear, no one fell from the ceiling when they took the photo. So, what happened? As further investigation on this story has brought no plausible explanation, there exists many speculations, including one that argues that the shadow is the ghost of the previous owner of the house. But my question is, why is he falling from the ceiling, and why did he have to ruin that beautiful family photo? I remember seeing this photo on the internet when I was probably too young to see it, and after all these years, this image still gives me the chills. And number 1. A collection of things. I I don't even know how to go on to describe this photo. It's a collection of things, but you can't really make out what any of the things are. At first glance it appears normal, but upon closer inspection it is incredibly difficult to make out any object, as everything is blurred to the point of being indistinct. Your brain is trying hard to grasp some sort of pattern to understand the context of the photo, and it looks so much like there is context to be found, but it's simply impossible. The photo is named Name One Thing in This Photo, and it was made by someone unknown. Many people have described this as what you see when you're having a stroke, but has not been released to what this is or why it was made. All I can say is that it makes me wildly uncomfortable, and I'd love it if it were deleted off the internet forever.
Off in our number 10 spot, we have the Salem UFO. On the morning of July 16, 1952, this photo was captured by Shell Alpert and has stumped people ever since. The photo shows 4 unidentified objects hovering in the air above Salem, Massachusetts, and was taken at the Salem Coast Guard Air Station. The objects seem to be above the Winter Island and Cat Cove areas, but there really isn't much more that is known about this strange incident. There are a few theories regarding this photo. One is a camera glitch, others think it may just be light reflecting off of the window that the photo was taken through, but of course there are people who point to similar incidents that happened in the 1950s, and of course believe it is proof of extraterrestrial beings. It is very likely we may never know exactly what's going on here, but the air of mystery it leaves is definitely kind of cool. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Frozen Man of Mount Everest. This photo comes from 1996 and it shows Beck Weathers getting treated after the Mount Everest disaster. The Mount Everest disaster took place on May 10th and 11th in 1996, where there was a blizzard on the mountain that ended up stranding and taking the lives of 8 people who were aiming to descend the mountain. Beck was a part of the team who was climbing the mountain on this fateful day, and he ended up suffering from snow blindness during the climb. He actually fell into a hypothermic coma because it was so cold, and he suffered severe frostbite on his face, hands, and feet. Pretty miraculously, he not only survived, but ended up walking back down to camp in order to get help, where he was then taken by helicopter to receive treatment. He ended up needing his hands, parts of his feet, and even his nose amputated, but he survived this whole ordeal, and that is the most important thing. In our number 8 spot today, we have the reflecting pool. This is one of the creepiest or most chilling images ever taken. It depicts a young girl in a graveyard who is looking down at a reflection in a pond. Okay, maybe a little eerie, but not exactly chilling. What makes this photo what it is, however, is that there are seemingly 2 reflections looking back up at this little girl. No one knows who this girl is, where she is, or even when this photo was taken, but it is estimated to have come from somewhere around the early 1900s. This photo was analyzed and it has been said that it is unaltered or edited. Who knows how this photo was possible? Maybe there was some sort of invisible entity standing beside her that we could only see the reflection of, like a reverse vampire or something. In our number 7 spot today, we have the elephant's foot. This photo looks like it's just a big lump of nothing, but it is called an elephant's foot. No, it's of course not a real elephant's foot, and instead is just called that because of its appearance. This lump was actually created from the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown, and it is just a mass of corium and other materials that were in the core of the reactor. This elephant's foot was located in the steam distribution corridor, which is under what's left of the reactor. While this mass doesn't produce as much radiation as it did before, it does still produce a deadly amount even today. Like, so much so that just a few minutes of being around it is enough to get a lethal dose of radiation. It's kind of crazy that even though they knew this, they were still standing there taking pictures of it. For a long time, the severity of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster was being kept a secret from the public and those who it mattered to the most. Photos like these only give us a glimpse into this horrible disaster and how things went down. In our number 6 spot today, we have the penitentiary. This photo comes from what is left of the Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. This prison used to be the most famous and the most expensive in the world, but now this is the sort of thing that is left of it. This prison is actually now used as a tourist attraction, and it becomes a haunted house during Halloween. The prison used to house some pretty high-profile prisoners, such as Scarface himself, Al Capone. The prison was opened in 1829 and was known for its advanced technology for the time. They had things like central heating, flush toilets, and shower baths, baths in each cell. These were all considered luxuries in 1829. The first prisoner to be held there was Charles Williams, who was facing a 2-year sentence for theft. When he arrived at the prison, he had a hood over his head so as to protect his identity, but also so that he wouldn't know what the rest of the prison looked like, so he would never be able to plan an escape. While prison is never good, the craziest thing about this specific one is that all of the prisoners lived in isolation. I can't even imagine what that would be like, especially for the people who found themselves there for a long period of time. This photo is just a truly haunting reminder of all that once went on in this prison. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Stanford Prison Experiment. This photo comes from 1971 during the Stanford Prison Experiment. For those of you who aren't familiar with this experiment, it started on August 14th, 1971 and was led by university psychology professor Philip Zimbardo. The experiment took student volunteers and divided them into 2 groups, one group of prisoners and one group of guards, and they placed all of the volunteers into a fake prison that was created for this experiment. The experiment aimed to see if and how quickly humans would turn evil under the right conditions with the right amount of power. Basically, it was a test to try and answer the question of if humans are inherently good or inherently evil. I think everyone was pretty shocked with the results. After just 6 days, the experiment needed to be concluded because the guards began absolutely tormenting the prisoners. It really showed the kinds of things humans can be capable of, even after a short time. This photo is definitely reminiscent of that experiment, and it serves as our reminder. In our number 4 spot today, we have the acid drum. This photo comes to us from the inside of a house of one of the most terrible people, the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. This photo was taken from the inside of his home after he was found and caught by authorities. Before his arrest, he was sadly able to take the lives of 17 people. Although this photo might look kind of plain, the horrors are plentiful. This shot shows a full drum of acid that was located inside of his home. I probably don't need to tell you what it was used for, because who has a full drum of acid inside of their home? Especially when you're a serial killer. I can't imagine the horrors investigators saw when they entered his home, and even previous to that as they investigated his crimes. Thankfully, Jeffrey was caught, and in 1992 he was sentenced to life in prison, but just 2 years later he was killed by a fellow prison inmate. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Gadget. This photo shows the first ever atomic bomb, and it comes to us from 1945. Called the Gadget, this bomb was an implosion plutonium device that was detonated in the Trinity test in 1945. This photo shows someone sitting next to it, so casually, like it's a stuffed animal and not like it's a world-changing device. The Trinity test was the very first time a nuclear weapon was detonated, and the Gadget was actually of the same design as the bomb that was later detonated over Nagasaki, Japan on August 9th, 1945. There is a very eerie nature about this photo and the seemingly casual behavior of the man next to it. Did he know what this was about to unleash? Perhaps not, but more eerily, maybe he did. In our number 2 spot today, we have Change. This photo was taken by Fred Blackwell on May 28, 1963, and is actually showing us a moment of protest. The 3 sitting at the counter are Joan Trompour, Anne Moody, and their sociology teacher, John Salter. The reason why this photo is so important is because these 3 are sitting at a quote white-only counter at Woolworth's Five and Dime store in Jackson, Mississippi, while being attacked by an angry mob. People are throwing condiments at them, and I'm sure saying some pretty nasty things. The 2 students went to Tougaloo College, which was a black college that ended up being at the core of the civil rights movement in Mississippi. It's amazing to see how brave they are, and a photo like this is really such an important message for us to remember today. In our number 1 spot today, we have Bikini Island. Bikini in the Marshall Islands was once inhabited by around 170 islanders until 1945 rolled around. The US president at the time, Harry Truman, ordered that the military continue to test nuclear weapons just in case they were needed in the future, since this was shortly after the end of World War II. Unfortunately, Bikini was the place that was chosen to be the testing site, since all planes and ships traveled on routes that weren't close to the area. The residents of the island were asked to vacate, quote, for the good of mankind and to end all world wars, to which they of course obliged, under the impression that they would one day be able to move back. Test weapons were detonated on the reef itself, on the sea, in the air, and underwater, and this photo shows what was happening during just one of these tests, and it wasn't even the largest one. Although the former residents of Bikini were promised that they would one day be able to return home, the island still remains uninhabited because of the mass amounts of radiation that still exist here.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Victorian memorials. I'm a sucker for dark history, and when it comes to the Victorian era, there is nothing more grim, honestly. Deadly dresses, the great stink, rats everywhere. It's a dangerous time. The life expectancy was of course a lot shorter than it is today. So you really had to hold on to those you loved, right? But this is a time where we don't have iPhones, we don't have Facebook just randomly showing you memories. Remember this? Like, no, stop. So how do you remember a loved one after they've passed away? Well, Victorian mourning jewelry, that's how. In the 1750s, it would be normal to carry with you a gold locket with hair from your past lover. It's, yeah, a little locket of hair. How cool is that? Creepy? A little bit creepy. It was often braided or neatly folded. It wasn't just a ball of hair stuffed in a locket. Although it wasn't not that either, right? It was pretty gross. During Queen Victoria's reign, she would often wear mourning jewelry. She made the locket of hair cool, dare I say. She made it popular. After the death of Albert, she went into a horrible depression. She wore mourning clothes for decades and decades afterwards. That's why you see the Victorian era and everyone's wearing black. Everyone looks all grim. It's because they just followed suit. They just wore what the queen was wearing. Bracelets, necklaces, rings. The enamel of the rings also depends on the type of death that came prior, or the type of mourning that you're doing. White enamel represented death of an unmarried woman. Pearls represented tears. Turquoise meant that you were thinking of them on that day. And eventually pendants with hair became a next step. I'm a fan of mourning jewelry. I like that idea. I wish I knew this sooner. I wish I knew this 10 years ago. I'd be like, oh, my eyebrow piercing? Yeah, it's to mourn my mother. That's why I got it. Sad and rad. Boink. There you go. Number 9, Detroit Ice Fountain. Located on Washington Boulevard, the Detroit Ice Fountain was quite the hazard. A spectacle, but a hazard nonetheless. Back in the early 1900s, a fountain was the talk of the town during colder months. Believe it or not, it's how bored people were, I guess. The water jets would run all year long, so in turn this fountain would freeze and pile up, and then freeze and pile up again and again. Eventually this thing reached up to 60 feet tall, made of pure ice, right on Washington Boulevard. This was so dangerous, yeah, shifting ice, dangling 60 feet above your head on the way to work. Literally tons of ice cracking above your head. The tradition has now moved to Belle Island, thankfully, so now you can safely observe said ice trees. Just, you know, maybe not in the middle of the street anymore. Number 8, adhesive bras. Back in 1949, Life magazine released an article that caught everybody's attention, obviously. May 16th, 1948, the article read, "For 5,000 years, clothes have been draped, tied, buttoned, pinned, and buckled on the human form. This year, for the first time in history, they will be glued on." Bam. How? How did they do it? They changed the game. Could this be? We're gluing on shoes and pants now? Let's do it. Inventor Charles L. Langs changed the game, or so we thought, in 1949. He made bra cups that would stick onto you with adhesive. So just a ring of glue. There you go. This special glue, this adhesive, was promised to leave behind no residue, and it was also supposed to be painless. Yet at the same time, it was supposed to stay glued on, even if you were to jump into a pool from 10 feet high. How? That was the sell. No way. Well, Langs ended up selling the company to Textron because it didn't work. The product ultimately failed because the adhesive needed to be applied every single time you wore said cups. Nobody wants to do that. We're not putting on toothpaste on our bras every morning and sticking them on. And again, they barely even worked, so yeah, none of these, thank you. I'm good. Glue on pants? That'd be sick. Till then, we're not trying that. Number 7, German mascots. German history is of course dark. So dark that YouTube won't even allow us to say certain words about certain people from that time. But we do our best. We like to rhyme. That's how we trick them. For today's list, I thought we'd take a look at Germany's fad of taking photos with polar bear mascots. Yeah, apparently that was a thing. Here in Toronto, we like to pose up next to the raptor or jay, the blue jay. It's always fun. Dap them up, it's always a good time. These photos are part of the teddy bar collection. They span from the First World War to the early 70s. The German bear mascot remained throughout history, but the company surrounding the polar bear mascot of course changed drastically throughout the years, and it's really grim to look at. You see photos of a smiling mascot next to Yahtzee soldiers, and then the next page you see the same German mascot but 40 years ago. You know what I mean? It's odd. You're like, ugh. It's like seeing the Blue Jay guy back in the 1800s. You're like, what were you doing? Many believe this craze began after 2 polar bears arrived at the Berlin Zoo back in the 1920s. That's where it all kicked off. Because of course it was a major tourist attraction. But these suits, we can't forget, were first worn of course by natives for ritual practices, specifically the native people of Pacific Northwest. Romania as well. Dancers would wear real bear skins as part of a pre-Christian tradition. It was meant to drive away the forces of evil. Or just pose up next to Yahtzee soldiers. That's where we're at recently. Number 6, reindeer games. June 1941, the Germans were attacking the Soviet Union, and it was one of the biggest attacks, of course, in history. Britain and US had to send weapons, supplies, anything really just to keep them afloat, just to keep them in the fight. Now they sent these supplies through the Arctic Circle, that was the only route, but of course it was littered with U-boats. Thankfully, the British HMS Trident was there to watch the waters, and in turn the Soviets were able to fight on. So as a gift, as a thank you, the Soviets sent the captain of the Trident, the World War II submarine, a live reindeer. Yep, for the submarine, you know, just a reindeer for the sub. Doesn't make any sense, right? I agree. The British had to accept because it was ill-mannered if they didn't, so they had to keep a 6-foot-tall, real-life reindeer on a sub. Her name was Pollyanna. They brought her on board through a torpedo tube. Imagine being in battle and then having to deal with this after. You're like, guy, we don't need this right now, please. She was a crew member for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, imagine the smell? And she slept better than most. She shared a room in the captain's quarters. Horrible. Finally, the Trident returned home to Britain, and our leading lady was donated immediately to the Regent Park Zoo. Yeah, they didn't keep her on the sub. Weird, right? Number 5, Alfred Hitchcock and the MGM Lion. We're on part 3 now, so things are gonna get a little more bizarre. I'll veer more into the weird, gladly. Like this photo, for example, from 1958, taken by Clarence Sinclair Bull. The photo appears to be, well, it doesn't appear to be, it's Alfred Hitchcock serving tea to Leo the lion. The famous MGM lion, that's him. That's the guy. I want an autograph right now. He loves suspense and tea, who would have thought? North by Northwest was the only film Hitchcock did with MGM, and there's actually a rumor that he directed The Lion's Roar for the MGM intro. But that of course is nonsense, because you can't direct a lion. Yeah, just a little more lion-like. Awesome, thanks Leo. Let's take lunch. We're killing it. No way, that didn't happen. There have been 7 MGM lions in total, but Leo was known to be the most friendly. He's still in the logo today. He's an OG, he's made it. But again, back in the 1950s, it's hard to say what it really was like on set. You know, like it's still a lion, and it's the 50s. I don't think we have a lot of laws and stuff. It was probably a really rough time for Leo. Number 4, the hobble skirt. Just from this 1910 headline alone, I'm glad we don't have hobble skirts anymore. Although maybe they might make a comeback, we'll see. The headline reads, the hobble skirt is the latest freak in women's fashions. Skirts that are so tight around the ankle that locomotion is seriously impeded and speed is impossible. What a pitch. Doesn't that sound like a bad time already? Sounds like you're gonna be late for everything, honestly. French designer Paul Poirier made these to free the bust whilst also shackling the legs. To keep it a little, you know, keep it classy. You know, what's more classy than shuffling around all day long and being late? Nothing. Love the practicality on this one. Thanks, Paul. So despite how ridiculous and unsafe the hobble skirt looks and acts, only the wealthy could afford such a thing. Damn it, we're missing out. We'll get up next time. Guess I'll just stick with my jeans like a fool. Middle and lower class women wore skirts with slits or buttons. They could actually walk around. Imagine that, eh? What a weird concept. Hobble skirts luckily didn't last, but every now and then I sense a comeback, you know? With the Kardashians, I'm like, that's close. That's close to a hobble skirt. Locomotion is seriously impeded. What a sell. Number 3, Gloria Steinem. Back in 1963, the Playboy Club in New York City was one of Hugh Hefner's greatest accomplishments at the time, of course. The club was the talk of the town until Gloria Steinem came along. See, Gloria was a feminist writer. She created Miss Magazine back in 1972, but her career began much earlier, around the 60s. See, she got a job as one of these Playboy bunnies and worked at the club undercover, secretly taking notes on how this key holders only establishment was actually operating, you know, behind the pages. The staff were these young women, the bunnies of course. They had to wear black bodysuits, the puffy white tails, the whole getup, and at age 28, Gloria worked undercover for 3 weeks. The piece she released after, appropriately titled A Bunny's Tale, got so much attention that it kickstarted her freelance career. It made her a feminist icon to this day. This photo of Gloria undercover shows you the comfortable work outfits that she had to endure. That's horrible. It's all dark too. You can't even see what's going on. People are smoking inside. It's like Peaky Blinders. It's horrible. I don't think she had non-slips on. You know what I mean? In a collection of her writings, Gloria reflects on the undercover piece, saying how it has now outlived all the Playboy clubs, both here and abroad. That was before Hefner passed away in 2017. I'm sure she didn't mean outlive literally by this statement. But she also did, you know? Number 2, Stalin Photoshop. Deepfakes are getting out of control. It's insane. Modern technology is really making it hard to tell what's real and what's not. I'm falling for a lot of things online lately. I'm starting to feel like an old man, I'm not gonna lie. Photoshop is also an essential now for any project. That's probably why you clicked this video. You saw the thumb and you're like, what's this? Photoshop. Back in 1939, a photo of Stalin was published and he looks great. Guy looks amazing, some would say too good. He was touching up photos as far back as 1939 to make himself look more powerful, more healthy. But even if you got a photo with him, there's a chance you would be digitally removed later on. Like Nikolai Yevtsov. Yeah, the leader of the NKVD, he was in a photo with Stalin, but around 1937, Nikolai was responsible for orders that had over 1 million people arrested. And to make matters worse, half of them were executed for crimes against the state. So it wasn't ideal, of course, to be in a photo with Nikolai. He was denounced, imprisoned, and died in 1940, so Stalin had him erased and replaced digitally in that photo. This man was ahead of his time. Even today we're replacing actors in movies with different actors. And you wouldn't even know it. And finally, number 1, Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. Yes, we all remember hearing about this at one point, even if you wanted to or not. Bill Clinton talking about not having relations with that woman. Yeah, back when we had to download music on LimeWire, this would just pop up out of nowhere and blow your eardrums out. This was a huge scandal. This was that scandal. It was 1998. Clinton White House intern Monica Lewinsky was 22 years old and they had a relation from 1995 to 1997. Lewinsky said she hooked up with Bill 9 different times at the White House. Of course, you have to count. You're at the White House, obviously, you're keeping note. And apparently, according to her schedule, Hillary Clinton was also at the White House for at least 7 of those days. Hey, big yikes. Whenever I see this photo, I wish I was alive to see this unfold in real time. I mean, I was alive, but I was, you know what I mean. Kicking off our list at number 10, Late Night Dip. Alright, it wouldn't be a Taylor McWaters list if we didn't mention aliens more than once. This video was leaked last year in May. The footage is actually from 2019. It was recorded in San Diego. The Pentagon has since confirmed its authenticity. The UAP, the unidentified aerial phenomenon here, we don't say UFOs anymore, that's so old school. The UAP is sphere-shaped and it's flying at extremely high speeds. No exhaust, no propulsion system, just a metal ball whipping by San Diego. The sphere then vanished into the water afterwards. So in case you're wondering, no, it didn't land, no aliens got out. They're like, hey, how fast was I going? No, none of that. We have no answers. No answers yet. Number 9, Talos.
Basically, I'm here to announce that we're building Iron Man.
Tactical Assault Light Operator Suit, aka Talos. It was once a project announced back in 2014, and like the former president said, this was supposed to be a modern day Iron Man suit of armor. Didn't end up being like that at all. It was supposed to change warfare entirely, but 5 years later, the project was scrapped. Or was it? It probably wasn't. Of course not. We're still working on Apple Watches. You're telling me they're gonna scrap this? Good joke. On one hand, obviously it's hard to do. We could barely launch Google Maps in one go, let alone a suit of armor. I imagine it's complicated. Sure. But with recent leaks, we can now take a peek at what could have been. See, ideally the suit would have given the user advanced tactical awareness alongside advanced military grade armor, which has an exoskeleton underneath that's wired to the helmet and the rest of the suit. You're pretty much Iron Man. They figured out a few things while creating the suit, but overall this Iron Man armor wasn't close to being like what we're seeing on the big screen. We're getting pretty close. We're getting alarmingly close, I'd say. Number 8, the Kola Well. If you dug a hole through the center of the earth and jumped in, would you come out the other side? Of course not, this isn't a cartoon. But the Arctic Circle back in the 70s sure did look like a cartoon. The deepest hole on the planet. Yeah, let's gather resources and focus on this for a bit. Sure, during the Cold War, we love it. Scientists began working on the project in 1970. For many years, Russian scientists in winter coats were drilling a hole, just down as deep as they could get. What a great job that would be, eh? They got 1/3 through the Baltic continental crust and they found rocks older than 2 billion years. It was quite the project, it was exciting. But eventually they hit this muddy lava and then in 1992, they stopped drilling. A huge concern here was that demons would be released from the earth. That's fair, that's more than fair, that's an okay concern. We don't want those around, I get it. The previous title for the deepest hole belonged to the United States Bertha Rogers hole, which reached 31,000 feet. The borehole still remains the deepest artificial point on Earth. Now, it was odd for the United States to focus on beating the Russians to the deepest point on Earth. We talk about the space race often, but we forget about this one. The deep hole race. Stanley Yelnads would be so disappointed in us. We gotta talk about this more. Number 7, radar footage. Now normally when we see leaked footage, be it of UAPs or leaked documents, it's always the worst quality, right? It's always taken with like a BlackBerry curve. It's hard to believe when military footage is horrible quality. Like, we're trying, help us help you. Like, how can we see photos of black holes and not have a photo of a UAP yet, right? Or do we? Well, Jeremy Corbell is here to help. He took to Twitter in May 2021 sharing footage of US Navy ships being swarmed by UAPs. This time we have radar footage from inside the ship. It came from the Combat Information Center in the USS Omaha. This 46-second clip was originally recorded on July 15th, 2019, and you could even hear a dude in the background yell about how fast the objects in the radar are moving. That's how you know it's authentic. It's a guy like, whoa, that's crazy. On that ship too, imagine what he's seen and he's surprised. I'm shook. Number 6, the Amityville photo. A little ghost stuff for us, why not? This photo was taken inside the Amityville house back in 1976. You see it's the boy with the eyes? Nice, you got it, nice, good eye. At first I thought this was from a horror movie, it looks fake almost, or set up, until you start to read the details. See, this photo was taken with automatic cameras equipped with infrared. So this ghost here probably wasn't expecting a selfie, right? Photographer Gene Campbell took this photo in 1976. Gene was working with paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren on this case. Yeah, this was long before the movies. They were just really working on this case in real life. This is history. This is so scary. The photo was revealed 3 years after it was taken on the Merv Griffin show, and many believe this is the ghost of John DeFeo, one of the boys who lived there in 1974. Now you can't really do this anymore, right? You can't just whip out photos from an otherwise, crime scene and be like, okay gang, is this a ghost? Let's take a look. No, there was obvious backlash for obvious reasons. It took 3 years for that photo to reach the public eye, and now all of a sudden everybody is talking about ghosts. Did this help? Probably not. Again, this was long before The Conjuring was ever released in theaters or anything like that. This would have been so random to see on TV, how frightening. Also, who believes in ghosts here? What's the ratio? Comment down below, I'm genuinely curious. I'm like 50-50 in the ghost game. Number 5, quantum computer. This next one is pretty scary, not a fan of this one. Computers are getting more and more advanced by the day. Andrew Garfield told everybody that Spider-Man leak was fake, and we're all like, okay, we'll believe it. Yeah, we believed it. That's how good technology is. It's getting dangerous. Poor Andrew Garfield, but also poor us. We're for sure doomed any day now. But thanks to our man Snowden, Edward Snowden, it was reported in the Washington Post back in January 2nd, 2014, that the NSA is secretly working hard at creating their own computer. It's called the quantum computer, and it cost around $80 million to build. It's a little more expensive than the new iPad. Just a touch. This computer is safely stored in a massive room-sized metal box, not intimidating at all, and it's part of a program called Penetrating Hard Targets. So it can break encryptions for just about anyone, anything, finance records, medical records, your old MSN, hopefully not, but maybe. What a nightmare that would be. The NSA is well on their way to breaking every form of public encryption, so we're doomed. This quantum computer can theoretically break through any RSA encryption as well, which for the average computer today, that takes years. The supercomputer can break through a lot faster. So yeah, you better clear that history now while you still can, or else everyone's gonna see. Number 4, more government leaks. Even allies of the United States weren't safe during Edward's leak. Thanks to Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the United States was spying on Germany, France, and Spain, all at the same time. Horrible. The NSA tapped into 35 phones spying on 35 different world leaders, one of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA publicly immediately after finding out and said this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. That hits deep, eh? I thought we were friends, we're pulling that card out? Ooh, world leader or not, nobody was safe during these phone calls. It was also reported that the NSA was monitoring calls in Spain for the average folk. Yeah, they monitored around 60 million calls in 1 month. Imagine how boring that job would be. Just some dude listening like. Number 3, North Sentinel Island. Heading over to India, this island is home of the Sentinelese tribe, one of the most forbidden islands on the planet. We don't talk about this island nearly enough. It's fascinating, and it's also equally terrifying. It's located in the Bay of Bengal. North Sentinel Island is about 1,200 kilometers away from India, and while most islands are shrinking or just disappearing, this one actually grew back in 2004. Yeah, the island lifted up a couple of meters during an earthquake, so the west and south sides gained an extra kilometer. Yeah, more room for more inhabitants. Let's talk about them. The inhabitants on this floating cursed island are among the few uncontacted tribes left in the world. They've apparently been there for 50,000 years, and there's no signs of agriculture or even fire, yet somehow this tribe has thrived for this long. And if we try and get close and, talk to them or see what's up, they try and drive everybody away violently. In fact, back in 2006, 2 fishermen lost their lives because they got too close to the island without knowing who was on it. The Indian government also didn't roll up to the beach after and start interrogating locals. Instead, they made the island now officially forbidden to enter, so stay away. Number 2, the mouse with an ear on its back. What a transition, awesome, we love segues. Back in 1997, Stuart Little here became the test subject to determine if scientists could grow cartilage using chondrocytes, aka cells from a cow. And it worked, and now we're still talking about it today, obviously. It all started when Joseph Vicanti, pediatric surgeon, began designing human organs. This was during a shortage. He wasn't just, bored and started to make ears. He was changing the medical game, and little did he know he was actually about to change the science game as well. He constructed an ear and then told his brother Chuck and his partner Bob to not bring up the fact that he attached said ear to a live mouse. He's like, please don't mention the mouse, please. How can you not? Here, check out this new ear I made. Hey, one sec, let me catch it. What? That's disgusting. What's going on here? What's this science lab you have? So Chuck spilled the beans. He didn't keep said information to himself. Can you blame him? No. But good thing he leaked the information, because now we know cow cartilage can create cells. All because he spilled the beans. Nice. Thanks, Joseph, and also thanks to that mouse that totally didn't volunteer for this life. Can I Q-tip his back? I want to Q-tip his back. Let's clean that little ear for him, I bet that would feel great. It's like a back scratch, but an ear Q-tip at the same time. Imagine those mixed. Stuart Little, he's got it. And finally, number 1, motorized roller skates. This last one they've been working on for quite a long time. It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen working on this channel, so yeah, I had to end off this list with this. Motorized roller skates, what a dream. Is it happening? Are we close? I sure hope not. This photo was taken at the Sunoco station in Hartford, Connecticut. Context aside, this is an odd one. It's a guy with a briefcase filling up at a gas station, and he's wearing roller skates. Is this 2077? No, it's actually 1956. And that futuristic looking man right there, that's Mike Dreschler. He was working for a Detroit skate company, and he was very dangerously close to gas-powered roller skates. It sounds like something from a cartoon where he's like, oh, I'll get you, pew, and then he blasts off. This would never, don't try this. This is a horrible idea. They would have cost around $250, which today is around $2,400, and its max speed was 17 miles an hour, so you'd still be late and you'd still be buying gas. It was a lose-lose. Imagine this in the closing act of a Mission Impossible movie. How boring would that be? Now obviously the public wasn't supposed to see this. They feared that it would encourage folks to get creative on their own. So yeah, I'll reinforce that. Don't make rocket skates with gasoline. Thanks. Hit that thumbs up and don't make rocket skates. We love it. Don't eat Tide Pods or make your own jet boots. Taylor McWaters, there's a quote for you. There we go. Number 10, Go Pills. Introducing Go Pills, the pill that keeps you up for 40 hours straight. What could possibly go wrong? When the government tried creating these new pills, the right idea was in mind. Or so we think. Overnight workers, military, maybe you need to cram 3 days of studying in one night. You name it. The US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, was supposed to have your back. What happened? The Air Force has around 100 fatal crashes on record because of fatigued pilots. So US military was actively trying to create a solution for these physically demanding jobs. The closest that we have now to these Go Pills are something called modafinil, which is a narcotic approved by the Air Force to combat said fatigue, but it's not public yet, of course, obviously. Do you think these government Go Pills will ever make it to the public? I mean, I think coffee makes people crazy enough in the mornings. I'm all set personally. I'm on like coffee number 4. I'm jazzed up right now. Number 9, the heart attack gun. Sounds like a pretty calm weapon right there. The CIA had this weapon, and it was more of a dart gun than anything, but heart attack gun sounds pretty on the nose for this list. It shot a frozen dart filled with a specific toxin that, you guessed it, gave you a heart attack. Pretty pretty James Bond, right? It was frozen so that the dart would ideally melt away after it's done its damage. You know, destroying all the evidence, right? It's like some icicle killer stuff right there. That's some next level. There we go. Took me 17 seconds to remember what an icicle was called. I was like, what are those long, drippy, frozen things? The icicles. The CIA was really into poisons during the Cold War and apparently darts. Match made in heaven. The public caught wind of all this thanks to Senator Frank Church, and when Congress decided to look into where these tax dollars were going, they found a plethora of illegal methods used by not only the CIA, but also the NSA and the FBI and the IRS. A lot of letters coming in, a lot of sketchy letters. Frozen darts, that's insane. That's a confusing way to go out. You'd have no idea what happened. You'd be like, ugh, brr, ow. Like, it'd be that fast, that's crazy. Number 8. Project Iceworm. Ooh, speaking of cold, here we go. Back in the 1960s, under the Greenland ice sheet, the US Army started to build a mobile nuclear missile launch site, okay? It was codenamed Project Iceworm. It's a pretty fun name because it's cold and underground. We get it, right? Nice. The idea was that they would build the station close enough so that they could hit targets within the Soviet Union, all secretly, right? That was the whole idea. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Century that had to be done first. This is the top secret, sketchy stuff. Can't just hit the road with a few shovels, you gotta make sure it's livable first. Camp Century was a network of underground tunnels and places for workers to hang out, like a kitchen, a hall, supply rooms, communication center, all stuff like that. It was a supply camp. You know, whatever you imagine, it was that. There was also a nuclear power plant. That's the most important part, to keep everything active, right? This was kept from the Danish government for 7 years. A secret nuclear power plant for 7 years. Yeah, we don't like those. But in 1966, the project was canceled because of shifting ice. Or at least that's what they say. No, it's definitely shifting ice. The whole place is melted by now. Number 7, leaked voters. Back in December 2015, personal information from 191 million voters was leaked to the public online. It happened very fast. This feels like yesterday. I remember this happening online. I was actually quite worried about it. Researcher Chris Vickery found this data while conducting a security investigation. See, Forbes had described Vickery as, well, dare I say, a good hacker, for lack of a better word. They're called white hat hackers. They find weak spots in security without sabotaging or exploiting them. You know, they're not villains. They're just like, oh, check this file, gotcha. They're nice, that's key. We need that. That's the difference. 79% of those eligible to vote were the victims in this leak. All their names, addresses, birth date, phone numbers, emails, even photos, you name it. Things you don't want people knowing, let alone third parties online. It's now out there. We're still unsure who is behind this entire leak, so that's comforting to go to sleep to, knowing. CSO Online and databreaches.net suggest that the information more than likely came from a software provider called Nation Builder. But CEO Jim Gilliam announced that that was not the case and they did not create the database. He said, nope, false. Although he conceded that it is still possible that some of the information that it contains may have come from data that they make available for free to campaigns. So a third party took what they could and really ran with it. It wasn't them, it was just their weak security. Nice, we love that. Just my photo, just in someone's Google Doc. I'm like, awesome. I don't want anything out there. I don't want my Google search history out there. That sounds suspicious. Number 6, the Space Cube. In honor of Jordan Peele's new space movie coming out called Nope, we have to include some alien cover-ups in this government list. Not too long ago, this spinning cube-looking drone, hopefully drone, was spotted over Missouri, and then only a couple hours later, it was seen again 700 miles away. That's a pretty far distance. That's a fast travel time. What's your secret? 44-year-old Matthew Jandeka was minding his own business, hanging out on the porch, when this caught his attention. It was a sunny day, so the light reflected off the cube and it caught his eye. But then a day later, another guy, 30-year-old Justin Johnston, he saw the same exact thing in the sky. He saw it while he was driving home. The light and the reflection, same thing, caught his eye. At first, I thought maybe it was a balloon, but the movements were odd, he said. Well, it sounds like whatever this thing is, military aircraft, drone, whatever the case, it's pretty fast. Maybe they're filming Top Gun 3, who knows? No spoilers. Number 5, Surtsey Island. Some islands are forbidden, like Heard Island. They're home to animals and wildlife that the government refuses to let humans be part of, which is sketchy in its own way. A lot of Jurassic Park vibes over there. But when it comes to Surtsey Island, near Iceland, again, always Iceland, hiding secret government projects, well, Surtsey Island is a brand new island. We love it. Literally, this island formed from a volcanic eruption back in 1963, so scientists are using this fresh face of Earth to study what it looks like to not have humans in the picture for a change. Yeah, we have seed vaults, a forbidden island. These projects make people uneasy, hence why the government tries to keep them low-key. That is until I come out and then loudly announce it, and then tell you to hit that like button. Awesome. Number 4, WikiLeaks war log. Companies have to live somewhere, right? We're a film studio in Toronto, we're a place. We're not just a bunker, right? We're like an establishment. There's windows, we have a fridge, lots of coffee, we're okay. But where do places like WikiLeaks work? It's probably a sketchy establishment. It's probably nothing like Google, you know what I'm saying? Not a lot of beanbag chairs going on at WikiLeaks. Probably just one chair that everyone shares. Just one guy. It's literally just one guy. Today, it's a facility owned by Swedish internet provider Bahnhof. This is where they keep servers for WikiLeaks. Julian Assange was the front runner for this whole operation, so literally, like I said, it was one guy. His hard drive is stored in this bunker behind a 2-foot steel door accompanied by numerous backup generators, so you're not getting in, pal. In October 2010, WikiLeaks actually published Army field reports from 2004. It's now one of the biggest leaks in US history. This report confirmed that there were over 66,000 civilian deaths in the Iraqi war logs out of the 109,000 in total. This leak also suggested that some American troops were classifying civilians as enemies in their statistics. Yeah, which is not great. That's borderline. That's a big leak. These numbers were from 2004 to 2009 alone. Yeah, it's hard stuff. Number 3, military weapons. Getting into the alien stuff, here we go. Psycho-electronic weapons. Yeah, apparently we're in a DC comic now. We have ice darts, ice rays. What's going on here? The first time Curtis Waltman heard of these military psycho-electronic weapons was when he received documents via Yahoo. Of all the places to get documents, you're like, oh. This is 10 years old. Originally, he had filed the Freedom of Information Act request to Washington State Fusion Center. He was trying to find out more on the clashes between Antifa and the far right. But instead, he got a response and it was all about experimental weapons. He's like, this is not what I asked for. What is this? Open. The guy gets a zip file back in return and it's called EM Effects on Human Body. How do you not open that, right? And that's exactly what he did. He opened this file because, of course, and in it he saw diagrams on these weapons and the effects that they have on people. Muscle quaking, body pain, just shivering, just your body shuts down, it's horrible. One of the effects allowed users to control their dreams, so it's not all bad, it's just kind of not right, unethical. This was clearly sent by mistake. Nobody should ever know about any of these weapons, these super dream weapons. I don't even know what's going on there. The only emails I get are from student loans. Those ones are not a mistake. Those ones I will keep deleting. Number 2, inner armor. Not to be confused with your inner ninja. It's also pretty mighty. We've all wanted to be a superhero at some point, okay? I'm always late. I would love super speed. Any day, that'd be great. Well, DARPA's Inner Armor project almost made a dream come true. It was the Pentagon's way of creating super soldiers. Yeah, like Iron Man, they were literally working on this. Scientists use animals as a reference for these new abilities, literally like from a Marvel movie. They're studying the DNA of the stellar sea lion because it can reduce blood flow away from organs if need be, in order to reduce oxygen demand. So now we're studying that to try and make, I don't know, people like Atlanteans? Where are we going here? That would be sweet, just Aquaman with a tactical vest and a spear. Okay, that's sure. Dr. Michael Callahan, who was in charge of running the operation, he says the goal was to make soldiers kill-proof against disease, chemical weapons, radioactive weapons, harsh weather conditions, you name it, all that good stuff. Pretty much invincible. Now, this was back in 2007, and of course in 2014, Barack Obama announced that the United States was still building Iron Man. So maybe they're close. Maybe they haven't done it yet. Who knows? Honestly, I'm seeing videos every day of like these guys on hoverboards whipping down New York. We're so close to the Green Goblin in real life. We're or like the water peer guy, he like uses the water to float. That's like 2 villains. It's 2 villains right there in real life. And finally, number 1, MK Ultra. We have to finish with a mind control project. It's the only way, of course. MK Ultra was a secret CIA project that lasted from 1953 to 1973. It's a long time. They ran hundreds of experiments to US citizens. They gave them illicit substances and other narcotics, just horrible stuff, all in attempts to crack mind control. Or as they call it, information gathering. Mind control. It's definitely mind control. In the 50s and 60s, around the Cold War, the United States believed that the Soviets, Chinese, and/or North Korean agents were all using mind control in the war. I mean, how else could you explain brainwashed prisoners of war in Korea, right? Nothing to do with what they're doing to them. Sure. The program had subjects take LSD, hallucinogens, paralytics, electric shock therapy, horrible stuff, just being put through the absolute worst, all in places like universities or hospitals or even prisons, right? You have no idea this stuff's happening. The happenings of these projects weren't fully known to the public until years after it ended. But the agency destroyed most MK documents back in 1973 when the whistle was blown, so we think we know, but in reality, we only know little to what happened during MK Ultra.